Hi, I'm Tim. Welcome to Watchbox, and thanks for logging on. We are opening the weekend with watches. Everything is for sale. Waking up with the good stuff. Reach out to Team Mosso at thewatchbox.com for prices. We are also constantly looking to build inventory. We buy, we trade, we sell. We will pay cash. We'll buy your entire collection. No upper limit on value paid. Reach out to Team Mosso at thewatchbox.com to buy, trade, or sell. All right, jumping straight in. Here we have the latest generation of Omega Seamaster Planet Ocean. This is a lovely watch, sometimes known as the Creamsicle, because of its combination of orange ceramic bezel, orange dial accents, and white ceramic dial. You can also see that the actual indices themselves feature an inlay of white superluminova. Let's take a quick look at this one in the dark, because the luminescence really is superb. As you could see, not only differential lume for the minute hand and the bezel pearls, you can tell those apart in a jiffy in the dark, but we've got a fully calibrated, fully luminescent 120 click bezel. This is a very fine, non-approximate timing bezel. You really do see every minute spelled out all the way around, something typically only seen on military divers. Now jumping back, you can see this is the 43.5 millimeter case, stainless steel. Originally, this was the size of the Planet Ocean GMT, and it was only available as a GMT in this case size. Now you can get it as a traditional three-hand date diver. It's not a particularly thin watch. It's 16.2 millimeters, but nor is it huge across the wrist, as it's about 49-50 millimeters and from lug to lug, and that is the measurement here, because you can see the bracelet pulls straight down out of the lug profiles. The watch has a couple of fun features. We'll zoom in a little bit, take a look at those. Obviously stop seconds, so you can set it to a reference time, but this is an Omega 8900 series, so we have the ability to adjust the hour hand independently. Of course, ceramic bezel insert, highly scratch resistant, helium escape valve for you saturation divers to let helium out of the watch as you ascend from a dive. We have a 600 meter water resistance rating, a rather deluxe clasp. You can see there's a fold-out dive extension, but then there's also a push-button slider that gives you 9.6 millimeters of incremental adjustment, all of it quite solid and secure. A massive thick-gauge steel single swing arm with twin trigger release, and then through the case back, you can see the caliber 8900, twin barrels, automatic winding, 60-hour power reserve, a master chronometer, timed and durability tested as a fully assembled watch. It's got a full balance bridge with a free-sprung balance. It's got an anti-magnetic hairspring, balance staff, and escapement, anti-magnetic to over 15,000 Gauss, and it has the tri-level coaxial system. These watches are well known to run to only fractions of a second of deviation per day. A really cool piece. The Planet Ocean, probably a great balance between capability and wearability. The Ploprofs, they get extreme. The Diver 300 meters are entry level. This is meat of the market, a nice Rolex rival, especially for something like a Sea Dweller 43. Now we're going to go high horology for a moment. This is a watch that originally bowed in 2014 in steel, but for 2021, we got a full rose gold version of the Patek Philippe Nautilus travel time chronograph. So we have a watch that's 40.5 millimeters in diameter. You can see it's got a lovely blue dial, rose gold hands and indices, fully luminescent, 120 meters water resistant. I'll wind this one up, but you can see how triggers are used, integrated into the horns on the case flank to hide, or if you wish, differentiate the twin independent time zones. We have AM PM for local time, AM PM for reference time, a rarity on a dual time watch. Usually you only get AM PM for the place where you are not. Let me use my fingers here. Easier to do when I'm not under the camera. And so what we've got right here is an unusual layout for a chronograph, where there's actually a 60-minute register down at 6 o'clock. A lot of chronographs don't have a minute register that goes up to 60. There's also a date up at 12 o'clock, and it's only fractions of a millimeter thicker than a 5980 Nautilus chronograph, so there's really no penalty paid for the extra capability you get here. Also, it's a flyback chronograph, reset, restart without first stopping, full integrated and immaculately hand-finished rose gold bracelet around the backside, caliber 28-520, free sprung, silicon anti-magnetic hairspring, 55-hour power reserve, column wheel and vertical clutch chronograph. and guaranteed accurate to no worse than -3 plus 2 seconds per day from the factory. As I mentioned, this watch, despite its additional complication relative to a 5980, wears just like a 5980, and on my 16 centimeter circumference wrist, it's a real treat. Whether it's upside down or right side up, you can see that this watch is a pleasure. The chronograph and travel time elements are also well integrated, so it doesn't change the iconic profile of the Nautilus right here. And you can see it's not even that thick. It's under 13 millimeters thick. This is a great all-arounder, maybe the most capable and versatile watch that Patek Philippe makes. Jumping from Patek to Audemars Piguet, here we have a watch that was controversial when it came out. I do like the Code 1159s, and I think that what's fascinating is, as so often happens in the history of watchmaking, something that was initially unpopular becomes really collectible down the line. This is the 2019 version of the self-winding dial. Now, let me show you what I mean by that. Okay, first of all, solid black, solid white, or solid blue were the colors for the first year before they started using gradient lacquer. But there's another feature distinctive of these really early codes that most people miss. See the font used for the 3 on the dial. See the font used for the 3 on the chapter ring. Now see the font used for the 3 on the date disc. It's 3 different fonts. And I don't know if AP overlooked this initially, but this is how they were shipped in the first year. By 2020, AP had the same font for every numeral on the watch, and these early dials are exceptionally scarce. They're not making any more of them. It's almost like a flawed stamp being more collectible than a correct stamp. Now, it's not too thick. It's about 10.7 millimeters thick. It's 41 millimeters in diameter. The one respect in which it's fairly large for a dress watch is lug-to-lug. It's just over 49 millimeters in that regard. We'll zoom out a little bit and you can judge for yourself as I put it on my wrist. Here we have a textile and leather strap. You can see it really is quite flat, no issues there. But again, broad. A big watch. I would say you need a wrist of at least 15 to 16 centimeters circumference to wear this particular dress watch. The detail of the code case and crystal is superb. As you can see, everything from the buckle, which is specific to the model, includes a hexagonal fixing screw, to the case itself, which features those hex screws on the lugs, and then a rounded octagonal mid-case. It's just rife with references to the royal oak. You can also see that the lugs are evacuated and buttress-like. They're internally beveled, they're externally beveled, and that the crystal itself is not flat across the top. You can see the unusual curvature from end to end and then side to side that gives it idiosyncratic and memorable refraction qualities as you move it through the light. And on the back side, we have caliber 4302, now larger than the old 3120. It's also got a longer power reserve. This is 60 hours, 4 hertz beat rate, hacking seconds, quick set date. We have ceramic bearings for the winding rotor, which features the coats of arms of the Audemars and Piguet families. To remind you that AP is the oldest continuously family-owned and run brand in Switzerland. That's among watchmakers. Jewelry might be different, but among watchmakers, it's AP. We also have a full balance bridge and a free spring index because this movement was designed with sports watches in mind. Speaking of sports watches, this watch is both a sports watch and a dress watch. If you like the two-tone Rolex Explorer, well, you've got to check this out because this is a Datejust 36 116203 roulette date tuxedo dial, yellow gold and stainless steel. And actually, an unusual feature is that on top of everything else, it has a domed bezel. That's why there's a 0 in the reference number. It's fully luminescent. It's an all-arounder with 100-meter water resistance. It's for him, it's for her, it's for dressing up, it's for dressing down. You can take it swimming, you can take it out on adventures, you can put it on with a tuxedo, and you can see how well it wears even on a smallish wrist. Chronometer movement, automatic, 40-hour power reserve, very shock tolerant, and it's got a roulette date, so the odds are red, the evens are black. A really cool piece and a wonderful option, discontinued as you see it here. Now, speaking of discontinued, a lot of folks yearn for the early days of Roger Dubuis when the company made watches like this. 37 millimeters in rose gold. This is the homage by retrograde perpetual calendar using a module originally developed by Roger Dubuis and Jean-Marc Viderecht, later of Agenor. It was created for the first Harry Winston Haute Horlogerie piece, the Accenter retrograde perpetual, back in 1989. Well, here, Dubuis uses it on his own watch, as Roger Dubuis, along with his partner Carlos Diaz, founded a company called Sogem in 1995, and that became the modern Roger Dubuis company. Unfortunately, later on, Dubuis left, and Diaz enforced his own aesthetic codes that were not to everyone's liking. Well, here we have a watch that's under 45 millimeters lug-to-lug, 37 millimeters in diameter, a lovely rose gold gilt printing on the dial by retrograde with the day and the date, month, leap year, and moon phase, all of it with lovely half-frosted alpha hands for better contrast against the black lacquered dial base. We have little rose gold cabochon, and then on the back, by the way, take a quick look at the dial. Geneva hallmark, sure, they advertise that, but you could easily miss up at the top where it says Bulletin d'Observatoire, and that is because this is a Besançon certified observatory chronometer. Tested as a fully assembled watch, it uses all of the ISO 3159 standards that the COSC does, but again, this is done as a fully assembled watch, not as a bare movement. Now you can see the Geneva hallmark on the base plate, and the finishing is outstanding. Just look at those bevels lighting up. You can also see a black polished stud holder and swan's neck fine adjustment mechanism. You can also see that the jewel sinks have all been internally beveled. We have circular as well as linear Côte de Genève, engine turning, solarization, satination, and black polished screws with chamfered slots and circumference. It's a perpetual calendar, of course, and it uses a base that is descended from Longines, the L990, but here is the Roger Dubuis 5707. It is beautifully finished, observatory timed, and Geneva hallmark certified. This is as good as it gets for independent horology back in the early days, back in the 90s. And this is one of the greatest watches to emerge out of that period, and hugely collectible today. Here's a watch that's a bit of a mystery. Now, at first glance, you're thinking, okay, Zenith El Primero Chronomaster, and you're not wrong. But back in 2016, Zenith launched a Chronomaster 1969 in conjunction with the Cohiba cigar brand. Okay, all good. So that was founded in 1966, and the El Primero 1969 Cohiba was equipped with a little engraving on the side noting 66, the year of Cohiba's founding. Now, the other problem here is that this is not that watch. It has the 42 millimeter case. It has the 1966 engraving. It has the same edition number as the Cohiba, 50 pieces in rose gold, but this clearly is not the open dial cigar striped Cohiba model. That looked considerably different. This instead looks like the kind of spearmint diet chewing gum you might chew to remove the smell of cigars from your breath. This is an unusual, mysterious watch that was sold in 2020, made in 50 pieces, and in every regard except the dial resembles the Cohiba. So what can I say? Only that this is a unicorn of sorts. You will not find any other photos of this watch on the internet, save the ones that we have of this example. A real mystery of a watch, and beautifully executed. To me, it's a lot more attractive than the Cohiba model. You can see it's well loomed, it's 100 meters water resistant, and it features the Zenith El Primero, the first integrated automatic high-beat chronograph on the market, circa 1969, and 50-hour power reserve, 10 beats per second, so we have a super smooth sweeping seconds hand. There's a quick set for the date, turn it all over. It's a good-looking movement. Not every automatic chronograph is, but the El Primero is and has always been. You can see the lateral clutch, you can see the blued column wheel, you can see it all in action. And of course, this is a limited edition of 50 pieces, super scarce. I may never see another, and I see thousands of watches a year. We'll throw it on the wrist. I'll advise you it wears a little bit larger than its rated size at 50.4 millimeters from lug to lug. The watch feels more like I would say a 43. It's a 42, but it wears like a 43 or a 44. It's a big watch. You're going to need a wrist my size to wear this, but if you've got the wrist, what a machine. Gorgeous to look at, technically accomplished from one of the great manufacturers in the business. There's real history behind this watch. I also like to include less expensive options on these shows. Granted, high-end watches is the business of Watchbox. That's where I tend to put my focus. It's also where my personal interest is. But I find the surge in watch prices, both new and used, to be exhausting. And it's nice to know you can still get a nice watch for not a lot of money, or at the very least, entry-level money. Here's a model that was made briefly from 2007 to 2008. This is the IWC Engineer Automatic. And as you can see, this is the reference 323401, 44 millimeters, in stainless steel and black ceramic. It's got a lovely multi-layer dial embossed with a repeating Ingenieur logo. It's 120 meters water resistant. It has plenty of luminescence, and it comes on a lovely integrated strap that gives it the appearance of a full bracelet watch, but with some nice tonal contrasts. Simple pin buckle on the reverse side. Unlike many Ingenieurs of the 2000s, this one is an in-house caliber. This is the 80111, and if you're wondering how the 80111 differs from the 80110, the 111 is just a little bit thinner. You could see the pawl-based Peloton bidirectional winding system created by the great IWC watchmaker Albert Peloton in the late 40s, industrialized in the 50s. We have a 44-hour power reserve, hacking seconds, a quick set date. It is adjusted to 5 positions, which is the chronometer standard. And this is the older Gerald Genta designed Ingenieur shape. For some reason, starting in 2016, IWC and its design director, Christian Knopf, moved away from the old Genta tonneau integration look for something inspired more by the 666 reference of the 1950s. Well, this look stood the test of time, in my opinion, better than those 666 revivals. This still looks fantastic, and unlike so many tonneau case sports watches that have been launched in the last 5 years, this one has real history. This is a Gerald Genta design. It's not like a Gerald Genta design. Plus, hailing from IWC, it is one of those great German-Swiss watchmaking brands, of which there are only a handful, and IWC is arguably the most famous and most accomplished. This is a cool watch, and again, a real great opportunity for someone who wants to wear a watch all the time and not worry about whether it's appropriate, whether it's going to be durable enough, whether it's going to be elegant enough. There's even an IWC rubber strap you can fit to it to take full advantage of that 12 ATM water resistance. Okay, now things are starting to get a little bit more exciting. If you love haute horlogerie, and I do, you probably noticed back in 2020 that Patek Philippe extensively redesigned its fascinating 5930 world time flyback chronograph. Well, the 5930 debuted in 2016 as a precious metal watch that was 39.5 millimeters. This is the idea fully realized. It's a 5935A, a new reference because it's a new case. This case is 41 millimeters in steel, so it's bigger than the 5930. It's also got a rose opaline outer dial with a center in rose with what they call a carbon pattern. Now, it's a world time watch using the Louis Cotier radial system, so we have 24 principal cities to represent the world's 24 principal time zones, and you can see how this works. Your principal city, your city of occupation, is up at the top. Let's say I'm in Karachi, Pakistan. I look at this 24-hour reference ring to know, for example, whether I'm looking at 5 p.m. or 5 a.m. And you can see it's 1700, so I know that it is 5 p.m. I also know, because I just look at the hour adjacent to these cities, in Noumea, it is 11 o'clock at night. In Hawaii, it's 2 a.m. And I can see in South Georgia, it is 10 in the morning. One half of this 24-hour ring is black. That's the approximate area where it's dark, and then the silver, the approximate area where it's light. And it does all the math for you. Let's say I want to travel to Midway to relive naval history. Well, the watch does all the math for me. You can see it's 1 in the morning in Midway. And all of this can be adjusted independently. If you just want to change the time without moving the reference cities, you can do that just by turning the crown. It's also a flyback chronograph, which means you can reset and restart without first stopping. Great for timing events that occur in rapid succession. It has a lovely stepped lugged case that shows how far Patek Philippe case making has come since it purchased Atelier Réuni, a case making specialist, back in 1975. We have what Patek calls charcoal blackened white gold hands and indices. There is lume. And then we have a full matching stainless steel folding clasp. Flip it over. Caliber 28520. Automatic winding, 55-hour power reserve, vertical clutch and column wheel chronograph, 6-position adjusted, anti-magnetic silicone hairspring, Gyromax style free sprung balance, and it is nicely decorated. watches in this price point are going to be a combination of hand finishing and machine finishing, but Patek has retained its integrity by keeping a large balance of hand finishing still visibly present on even its mass-produced movements. That's not something you see at JLC, at FP Journe, at Audemars Piguet, brands of that ilk. Those are esteemed brands, but Patek is doing things just a little bit better. This is a really special watch and an unusual one. Taking a quick look, you're going to wonder how the 41 wears on my wrist. Well, it wears large. It's almost 50 millimeters lug to lug, so I recommend your wrist be my size or larger to get the most out of this watch. It's 13 millimeters thick. That means the cuff can slide up over the side. It's not a problem. You're also going to note that the watch doesn't feel as heavy as you expect because unlike the precious metal predecessors, this one is stainless steel. That's also going to make it more scratch resistant. And since Patek has throttled back its steel Nautilus production, that leaves that alleged 20% of Patek production, which is steel, to be better distributed across other model lines, including dress watch complications like this. Here's a dreamboat. This, launched in 2020, is the Debitun DB25 XP Starry Sky. So there's a lot going on here. First, this is the thinnest of the DB28s. As you can see, my caliper tells me 8.6 millimeters. We also have spring-loaded floating lugs, so the lugs can actually cinch in to better fit your wrist. You can also see that the case is asymmetrical all the way around with a wonderful undulating wave of engine-reduced gadroons. So this is a guilloche. It's rendered in what Debitun calls microlight rather than conventional guilloche patterns, which would look out of place on a watch this modern. We have a screw-down bullhead winding crown. The dial, a little bit more conventional compared to other DB28s. Now, the DB28 won the Aiguille d'Or back in 2011 at the GPHG, and this watch marked 10 years since the debut of the DB28. That was 2010. This is a 2020 new model year launch. We have a wonderful black polished balance bridge hidden out of sight, the triple parachute shock protection system. We have microlight engraving on the dial with lovely rose gold hands. Take a look at those little white globes. Those are actually inserts of white gold. Two things are done on this dial. It's fired to create the blue. Debitun has a process for fire bluing titanium. And then the microlight engraving is applied. Then, finally, the last step, this is the third evolution of the dial. These little dowels of white gold are placed in different sizes to represent the celestial bodies, and this is a customizable watch. By default, any starry sky or starry various that comes from Debitun is going to have the night sky over L'Aubusson, Switzerland on the night Debitun was founded in 2002. Now, the watch has a 6-day manual wind power reserve. You can see on the reverse side we have more microlight as well as blued titanium. It's a 43 millimeter diameter watch made entirely out of grade 5 titanium, which means it's really light. You can see how easily it sits on the wrist. Debitun doing wonderful things these days, making thinner watches with the XP series, making smaller watches, bringing back the 40 millimeter DB25. And this is a very wearable watch. Even if my wrist were considerably smaller, with the variable geometry lugs, the thin profile, and the superb lightness, I could wear this even on a very small wrist, and as you can see, it has no trouble fitting underneath the cuff. You can also see Denis Flageolet's 2016 patent balance. Now, Denis is the genius watchmaker behind Debitun. He patents a new balance every couple of years as he manages to put more of the mass in the rim, reduce the effects of temperature change on timing, and reduce the effects of aerodynamics on the balance. That's why we have this fired blue titanium balance with white gold masses outboard. Now we have the company's proprietary silicon escape wheel to reduce friction and reduce the need for lubrication, and the company's proprietary hairspring, which is two pieces of a flat hairspring shaped by hand using a patented curve and then clamped together to give you the concentric breathing properties of an overcoil, but with the thin profile and shock resistance of a flat hairspring. So a lot to love right here with this DB28 XP Starry Sky. We also have a rock star launch from Moser. This might be my favorite new watch of the year. For 2023, Moser has launched a 42mm tantalum-cased, enamel-dialed Endeavour Perpetual. So this is the Andreas Streller Perpetual calendar system where you have a big date, a little stub index that matches the months to the hours. So 12 hours, 12 months. 3 quite literally means March, so we're looking at March 30th right there. The case is in tantalum, and it took Moser Moser 2 years to devise a reliable process for polishing the polished parts of the tantalum case. The hollows of the case are black polished. There's satination on the case flank, and it's vertical satination. The bezel is concave all the way around, and it flows broader at 6 o'clock and 12 o'clock. On the dial, we have a base that is actually white gold with a hammered-like texture, and on top of that, several different layers of glass-based paint, vitreous enamel, are applied, first in a very light aquamarine to create the color at center, and then darker enamel is applied at the edge to create this abyss blue fume fade. So the fade from light to dark is called abyss blue. Power reserve indicator over at 9 o'clock. It's rated 7 days. In fact, it will run for almost 9. We have a bi-directional quickset system here. I can turn the date and the month in both directions. And you can see how that little stub index is going to follow the date as it turns in either direction. You can also see, if you look very closely, that there's a seam between the two oversized discs that allow Moser to have such a huge date display. If you were to have all of those numerals on one disc, the watch would be enormous. So two overlapping discs allow Moser to have that large aperture and numerals to match in size. This is an incredible watch that has a wonderfully curved sapphire caseback. Super cool. You can see how it contours to the wrist. It's not easy to achieve a curvature of sapphire like that. Crown, the full deployant clasp, a Moser rarity, and caseback are steel. So you will note the watch is a very subtle kind of two-tone. This is HMC 800, so it's the manual wind 7-day power reserve twin mainspring barrel Moser in-house caliber. You can see it's got a lot of the characteristic features, the 800, including a caseback leap year phase indicator, which can be adjusted using the pusher on the flank. We've got 3/4 style bridges that are split in the center for ease of servicing, double crested Côte de Genève, and we have for both of the barrel arbors as well as the drivetrain all the way down towards the escapement, we have little golden chaton cups holding the pivot jewels, themselves fixed in place using black polished screws. This is a nod to the Moser watchmaking of the 19th and early 20th century. What you'll see is we have two hairsprings. This is special, and this is unique to this model. You have flat hairsprings 180 degrees apart, so when gravity causes one to induce faster running, the other will, by an equal and opposite margin, induce slower running. And we have those two hairsprings, the balance and the full solid gold escapement, made in-house by Moser through its precision engineering subsidiary. The balance, the hairspring, the escapement lifts out as a unit when the watch goes back for service, so it can be replaced instantly with a pre-serviced module, allowing dispatch in the return of your watch to you. It's only about 48 millimeters lug-to-lug, despite being 42 millimeters in diameter, and you can really feel the weight of that wonderful blue-gray tantalum. This is the coolest new watch of the year, and again, Moser, Andreas Striller, enamel, tantalum, an extended power reserve, an integrated manufacturer, a rare watch from a German-Swiss manufacturer that is not IWC, or perhaps I should say a Schaffhausen German-Swiss manufacturer that is not IWC. Again, this is my favorite new watch of 2023. Reach out to Team Mosso at thewatchbox.com for purchase and pricing details of any watch you see here.